In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen. Beloved in the Lord, let us draw near with a true heart, confess our sins unto God our Father, beseeching him in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ to grant us forgiveness. Our help is in the name of the Lord,
Who made heaven and earth.
I said, I will confess my transgressions unto the Lord.
And you forgave the iniquity of my sin.
Almighty God, merciful Father,
I, a poor miserable sinner, confess unto you all my sins and iniquities, with which I have ever offended you, and justly deserve your temporal and eternal punishment. But I am heartily sorry for them, and sincerely repent of them. And I pray you of your boundless mercy, and for the sake of the holy, innocent, bitter sufferings and death of your beloved Son, Jesus Christ, to be gracious and merciful to me, a poor sinful being.
upon this your confession, I, by virtue of my office as a called and ordained servant of the Word, announce the grace of God unto all of you. And in the stead and by the command of our Lord Jesus Christ, I forgive you all your sins. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
hearts of your faithful people by sending them the light of your Holy Spirit. Grant us in our day, by the same Spirit, to have a right understanding in all things, and evermore to rejoice in his holy consolation. Through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever.
Amen.
May be seated.
Our Old Testament reading for the day of Pentecost is from Genesis chapter 11. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its tops in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they all have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down there and confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
We read Psalm 143 responsively. Hear my prayer, O Lord. Give ear to my pleas for mercy. In your faithfulness answer me, in your righteousness.
Enter not into judgment with your servant, for no one living is righteous before you.
For the enemy has pursued my soul. He has crushed my life to the ground. He has made me sit in darkness like those long dead.
Therefore my spirit faints within me. My heart within me is appalled.
I remember the days of old. I meditate on all that you have done. I ponder the work of your hands.
I stretch out my hands to you. My soul thirsts for you like a parched land.
Answer me quickly, O Lord. My spirit fails. Hide not your face from me, lest I be like those who go down to the pit.
Let me hear in the morning of your steadfast love, for in you I trust. Make me know the way I should go, for to you I lift up my soul.
Deliver me from my enemies, O Lord. I have fled to you for refuge.
Teach me to do your will, for you are my God. Let your good spirit lead me on upright ground.
For your name's sake, O Lord, preserve my life. In your righteousness, bring my soul out of trouble.
And in your steadfast love, you will cut off my enemies, and you will destroy all the adversaries of my soul. For I am your servant. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever.
Amen. Our second reading is from Acts chapter 2. When the day of Pentecost arrived, they were all together in one place. And suddenly there came from heaven a sound like a mighty rushing wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. And divided tongues as of fire appeared to them, and rested on each one of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. Now there were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men from every nation under heaven. And at this sound the multitude came together, and they were bewildered, because each one of them was hearing them speak in his own language. And they were amazed and astonished, saying, "Are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear, each of us in his own native tongue? Parthians and Medes and Elamites and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabians. We hear them telling in our own tongues the mighty works of God." And all were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What does this mean?" But others mocking said, "They are filled with new wine." But Peter, standing with the 11, lifted up his voice and addressed them, "Men of Judea and all who dwell in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and give ear to my words. For these men are not drunk, as you suppose, since it is only the 3rd hour of the day. But this is what was uttered through the prophet Joel. And in the last days it shall be, God declares, that I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh. And your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams, even on my male servants and female servants. In those days I will pour out my Spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will show wonders in the heavens above, and signs on the earth below, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon to blood, before the day of the Lord comes, the great and magnificent day. And it shall come to pass that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
St. John, the 14th chapter. Jesus answered him, "If anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him. And we will come to him and make our home with him. Whoever does not love me does not keep my words, and the word that you hear is not mine, but the Father's who sent me. These things I have spoken to you while I am still with you. But the Helper, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, he will teach you all things, and bring to your remembrance all that I have said to you. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. You heard me say to you, I am going away, and I will come to you. If you loved me, you would have rejoiced, because I am going to the Father, and for the Father is greater than I. And now I have told you before it takes place, so that when it does take place, you may believe. I will no longer talk much with you, for the ruler of this world is coming. He has no claim on me, but I do, as the Father has commanded me, so that the world may know that I love the Father. Rise, let us go from here. This is the gospel of the Lord. Let us confess our faith in the words of the Nicene Creed. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and all things visible and invisible, and in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God, begotten of his Father before all worlds, God of God, light of light, very God of very God, begotten not made, being of one substance with the Father, by whom all things were made, who for us men and for our salvation came down from heaven, and was incarnate by the Holy Spirit of the Virgin Mary, and was made man, and was crucified also for us under Pontius Pilate. He suffered and was buried, and the third day he rose again
Church. I acknowledge one baptism for the remission of sins, and I look for the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. Amen.
When you consider nature, you can consider two things about it, or you can conceive of two ways of thinking about it, rather. You can think of how beautiful and peaceful and calm and still nature can be. You can think of going out to the lake and laying by the seashore and relaxing and just meditating on the beauty of God's creation. On the other hand, you can think about how violent nature can be. You can think about things like tornadoes or thunderstorms, which we've experienced even here lately. You can think about volcanoes erupting and hurricanes blowing things over and destroying things. You can think about how much nature moves and is not still, but intense, how it cannot at times be stopped. And if you look in the history of the church and in the Bible specifically, you will find, I think, these two perspectives of nature itself, but also of the general Christian faith and life parallel throughout different times and places and events in Christian history. You can think of how beautiful and peaceful the Garden of Eden must have been before the fall. You can think of Jesus himself going off to pray in silence, in peace, in respite, and calm in nature. You can think of how, just like the mountains and the landmarks stand firm and stand still and cannot be moved, how different times in Christian history, people, like Luther in the Reformation, for instance, had to stand firm and stand still and not move. On the other hand, you can think of the violence and the intensity and the way in which different things in Christian history cannot be stopped. Maybe at first you think of the flood of Noah, or the crossing of the Red Sea and the splitting of waters. You can think most of all of how Jesus' mission, how God sending his Son to the earth could not be stopped, no matter what would try and get in its way, no matter what the devil would tempt him with, it could not be stopped. You can think of people like Boniface, who we celebrated on Wednesday. This last Wednesday we commemorated St. Boniface. And I bring him up because he was a missionary, just like this is a place of mission. He's a missionary to Germans. And he could not be stopped despite his own persecution and his own martyrdom. Oftentimes there are Luthers in Christian history, but there are also Bonifaces. And there are Jesus. And there, in all those people, are both times of calm and times of intensity. But I want you to think about this, and I want you to think about mostly the latter perspective, the perspective of intensity, today, on this day, Pentecost. Because it is on this day, on Pentecost, in which the Holy Spirit is described precisely in terms of the force of nature. Listen to how Luke describes it. And suddenly there came from heaven a sound like a mighty rushing wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. And divided tongues as of fire. Fire appeared to them and rested on each one. And he says later that the Holy Spirit is poured out. It's poured. It's not a light sprinkle outside, it is a pouring down. Fire, wind. That is how the Holy Spirit comes, and it is how the Holy Spirit works. We have been learning for many weeks now in the Gospel of John who the Holy Spirit is and what his purpose is, how he is the helper, how he is the comforter, how he walks alongside you in every ill and every suffering that you have, how he is the Spirit of truth who guides you in the Scriptures, how he is the witness to Christ who points you back to Christ when you need him. We have learned all about who the Holy Spirit is and what he does, but this is how he comes and how he works, which is a slightly different thing. He comes like the force of nature, like a mighty rushing wind, like a rushing wind that you cannot avoid, that fills the entire space and everything in it. Like a mighty rushing wind, like a hurricane that knocks down anything that stands in its way. Like a mighty rushing wind that lifts the eagle's wings and makes it soar. Like a strong wind, and also like fire. You know what pouring fire is like if you've ever seen lava or a volcano. It cannot be stopped. It is intense. It is pouring. It is gushing. And it is destroying things in its path. Like a wildland fire or a forest fire that cannot be stopped. You cannot prevent this force. It is strong and it is moving. And with fire, you always have both destruction and also purification. Like the hymn says, the fire that comes and destroys all our worldly passions is intense. It is destructive, but destructive in a purifying way. And maybe that seems a little abstract to you, or maybe even a little surprising to you to talk about the Holy Spirit in this way. For I find it often in the church that when we talk about the Holy Spirit, we mainly just focus on how he intercedes for our prayer, for instance, or how he is this gentle comforter, for instance. And it is easier most of the time to think about the Christian life and the Christian faith in the first perspective that we talked about, the perspective of calmness and stillness and quietness and peace. It is most easy to think about your Christian life as a place where you go to rest, to think of this place as your little LCMS church where you come and you sit and it is enjoyable and you know the hymns and it is a nice place of respite and calm and quiet and a place of escape. And that is all good. That's all true. Christianity is that, and the Holy Spirit is also for our private and quiet prayer life. But it is also true, and it is also good, that the Holy Spirit is the other perspective as well. Is, as we meet him today in Acts 2, a rushing wind and a mighty fire. And why is that? Why isn't the Christian faith and the Holy Spirit himself not just the paraclete of our private prayer life? Why is he described in such intense terms, and why is Acts 2 and the rest of the story of the New Testament so focused on this intensity and this moving and this going forward? First of all, Peter makes it clear to us by quoting an Old Testament prophet, by quoting Joel, that Pentecost and that the coming of the Holy Spirit is utterly a matter of promise. Jesus has been preparing his disciples for a long time now for the Holy Spirit to come. And he does that because the Holy Spirit is promised. Pentecost is nothing other than the fulfillment of Easter. It's not its own separate thing, separate from Christmas, separate from Good Friday, separate from Easter. It is like those things, a fulfillment of things that were promised long ago. It shall be, God declares, that I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh. The Spirit has been there from the beginning. If you remember Genesis 1, hovering over the waters, breathing, proceeding from the Father and the Son, making man together in his own image. The Holy Spirit has been there from the beginning with the Father and with the Son, the Holy Trinity. And now he is coming as promised, coming in a new way, in a new covenant, coming as the Holy Spirit, who the one who fulfilled all things previously to this, Jesus, had promised him to come and promised that he would baptize with Holy Spirit and with fire, which is happening here at Pentecost. He is coming as he promised to deliver the gifts that Jesus promised he would deliver. He is coming to continually give the gifts of Jesus, give Christ over to the church forever. It is promised it will be this way, and that involves movement. That involves not being still. For the Holy Spirit to continually give Christ to us and give the fullness of Christ to us, he must be intense about it. He must come as promised, and that means he must come to us from one place to another that is moving. And it comes with intensity, and with surety, and with promise. By nature of who the Holy Spirit is, he must move. Secondly, he must move and be intense and be public and not be private and not be still, because the Spirit comes for the purpose of speaking God's word. Notice here that the Holy Spirit is all about language, and all about the word of Christ. And even when Jesus prophesies about the Holy Spirit in John, in our gospel reading today, he says, the Holy Spirit will bring to remembrance the things that I spoke to you. The Holy Spirit is about proclaiming the word of Christ. There are all these notions of many, many languages that are here at Pentecost, and I read them to you with the best pronunciation I could, and I believe they were correct for the most part. There are many languages. The many languages that God created at the Tower of Babel. And those languages are not bad in and of themselves. God ordained them to be languages that people spoke. So it is not just to unite language that the Holy Spirit unites the language of the people at Pentecost. It is, however, so that when they are united and can hear each other in their own languages, they can say that they hear them telling in their own tongues, quote, the mighty works of God. It is all about telling the mighty works of God that the Holy Spirit cares about language. This is why the Holy Spirit must move and be like the force of nature. Because he is about the mission of Christ. For the mission of Christ is nothing else, and you know this if you came to the evangelism workshop yesterday. The mission of Christ is nothing else other than telling of the mighty works of God. The mission of Christ is so that people can come to faith by hearing the word of Christ. And the Holy Spirit is on this mission. He is the leader of this mission. He is moving his church, moving his people, moving the vessels who have him in themselves. And so he cannot, because he must speak the word of Christ and give the word of Christ and inspire the very Bible which we have recorded the word of Christ, he cannot stop moving. The mission of Christ never stops moving. It must be public, it must spread, it must go forward. Just think of what caused the disciples to do what they did in Acts. It was nothing else but the wind of the Spirit that caused Peter to stand up and preach. It was nothing else but the flame of the Holy Spirit that kindled Paul to faith and caused him to go and preach. Just read the rest of Acts. It's all there in the story. The Holy Spirit is on this mission. And those who are vessels of him must also be like the Holy Spirit is. And you, brothers and sisters, you are these vessels. You who have been baptized, who have the breath of God in you, who have the Spirit of God in you and guiding you, you are like the vessels of the Holy Spirit. You are the vessels of the Holy Spirit. It is the flame of the Holy Spirit which kindles your faith into action. It is the breath of the Holy Spirit which is, so to speak, the wind beneath your wings. The thing that causes you to go forward for the mission of Christ. The thing that causes you to drive forward despite all sufferings. And so when you, who have the Holy Spirit, are being comforted by the Holy Spirit, who are being led into truth by the Holy Spirit, who are being witnessed about Christ by the Holy Spirit, you also comfort others. Witness to others about Christ. Lead others into the way of truth. For in doing those things which you have been called to do, the Holy Spirit is working in you. That is the life of one who is a vessel of the Holy Spirit. And the Spirit is powerful to do this. He is so powerful to do this that nothing can stop him. I want you to think about that for a moment. Nothing can stop him. However, it is true, even though nothing can stop him, that there are useless vessels for the Holy Spirit. vessels who try to quench the Spirit, which we are warned against, vessels which try to stifle the Spirit's work because maybe they just want some calm and respite and are not kindled into faith and action and works. These are called useless vessels. They're called ones who try and quench the Spirit, and that is a major spiritual danger. But the Holy Spirit is powerful. And despite any useless vessels that exist, the Holy Spirit will find another vessel if one vessel is useless. When rebellious Israel tried to stifle the Spirit's work, the Spirit spoke through prophets of old. When the Jerusalem church did not want to move forward in Acts, the Holy Spirit entered Paul. The Spirit is powerful and cannot be stopped. And the Holy Spirit is powerful here, in this mission. And in this mission, it is moving. It is not still. And that mission will continue. That mission will continue because the Spirit is powerful. Whether it is through me or through you, or whether it is in this building or another building, whatever happens to, quote, Concordia Lutheran Mission, end quote, the mission of Christ will keep going because his Spirit keeps going. The mission of Christ will continue. But I do pray that it continues here. And I do pray that it continues in you. Because in you, I do believe and I trust that the Holy Spirit is moving and is powerful, is kindling your faith into action and works, is kindling your faith and breathing into you a fervency for mission, is giving you comfort in all your sufferings, and is giving you all things needful so that you may know Christ. So be what you are, brothers and sisters, on this Pentecost day. Be ones who the Holy Spirit is working in and through. Ones who are not always still. And yes, you can still pray in quiet and calm and have peace in this place. But be ones also who are fanned and flamed through the fire of the Holy Spirit. So that when you tell others of the Holy Spirit, and when you witness Christ to others as the Holy Spirit does, they may hear the name of the Lord and they may call on the name of the Lord. And it shall come to pass that all who call on the name of the Lord will be saved. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. We'll continue with the offering. Make us ready to receive the most holy body and blood of Christ for the forgiveness of all our sins, and grant grateful hearts that we may give thanks to you. Lord, in your mercy.
Hear our prayer.
Lord God, Heavenly Father, we offer before you our common supplications for the well-being of your church throughout the world. So guide and govern it by your Holy Spirit, that all who profess themselves Christians may be led into the way of truth and hold the faith and unity of spirit, the bond of peace, and the righteousness of love. Send down upon all ministers of the gospel and upon the congregations committed to their care the healthful spirit of your grace, that they may please you in all things. Lord, in your mercy.
Hear our prayer.
Behold in mercy all who are in authority over us. Supply them with your blessing, that they may be inclined to your will and walk according to your commandments. We humbly ask your abiding presence in every situation, that you would make known your ways among us. Preserve those who travel, satisfy the wants of your creatures, and help those who call upon you in need. They may have patience in the midst of suffering, and according to your will, be released from their afflictions. Through Christ Jesus, your Son, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever.
Amen.
The Lord be with you.
And with thy spirit.
Lift up your hearts.
We lift them up unto the Lord.
Let us give thanks to the Lord our God.
It is meet and right so to do.
It is truly meet, right, and salutary that we should at all times and in all places give thanks to you, Holy Lord, Almighty Father, everlasting God. And most especially are we bound to praise you on this day for the glorious resurrection of your Son, Jesus Christ, the very Paschal Lamb, who was sacrificed for us and bore the sins of the world. By his dying, he has destroyed death, and by his rising again, he has restored to us everlasting life. Therefore, with Mary Magdalene, Peter and John, and with all the witnesses of the resurrection, with angels and archangels, and with all the company of heaven, we laud and magnify your glorious name, evermore praising you and saying, Our Lord Jesus Christ, on the night when he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat, this is my body, which is given for you. This do in remembrance of me." In the same way also he took the cup after supper, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink of it, all of you. This cup is the New Testament in my blood, which is shed for you for the forgiveness of sins. This do as often as you drink it in remembrance of me." The peace of the Lord be with you always.
Amen.
Christ shed for you. The blood of 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 Christ shed for you.
Now may this true body and true blood of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ strengthen you and preserve you in a true and a steadfast faith unto life everlasting. Go now in his peace. Amen.
Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good.
His mercy endureth
Let us pray. We give thanks to you, Almighty God, that you have refreshed us through the salutary gift. And we implore you that of your mercy you would strengthen us through the same, in faith toward you and in fervent love toward one another. Through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever.
Amen.
The Lord be with you.
And with thy spirit.
Bless we the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace.
Amen.